Hey everyone, welcome to Shino's Arsenal. We're going to be going over the most recent Arsenal news and transfer news. So make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another show. How are you guys doing? It's Monday. It's Monday. It's the day after the morning after the day before, or whatever the saying, however the saying goes. And I think we're still in the fog of the North London Derby. So I am very aware that emotions are still high. People are still processing what happened yesterday, but we do have to move forward. And so we did do a post-match podcast. I did a post-match podcast for the North London Derby with James B from AFTV. We're also supposed to do a rewatch, but we kind of have to reschedule that because Arsenal took forever to put up the full match. So we will get that up for you guys on Patreon. But if you guys want to dig deeper into what actually happened in that North London Derby, kind of talk about the Nketiah situation, why we keep chucking the ball back into our own net, why don't we look as good as we did last season, all that type of stuff, that is there. And this show is going to be mostly about how we move forward from there in terms of, maybe a striker signing in January. Ivan Toney is being heavily linked to Arsenal in the January transfer window. What does that look like? Does Nketiah move on? Does he go to Brentford, go the other direction? We'll talk about that, as well as the injury news around every single player that is currently injured at Arsenal. We have tons of news to cover on that front and how Arsenal are going to potentially deal with the people that are out for the Carabao Cup on Wednesday against Brentford. So there's a lot of Brentford. Brentford we're playing in the Cup. Brentford we're potentially getting a player from. So a lot of Brentford stuff. So again, make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you guys want to join Patreon, you can. The link is in the description. It is $4 a month. If you can't afford it or it's just not something you're into, no worries. There'll be tons of free content. There will be a watch along and player ratings for the Brentford game. So no worries on that front. Let's see what you guys are saying. Aman says, hopefully Brentford can do a swap deal. Pez says, Brentford surely can't afford Eddie's wages. Sohan says, Martinelli, Toney, Saka, oh my God, with Jesus as a backup right wing. Clement says, let's see what happens in January when it comes to Ivan Toney coming to Arsenal and Nketiah to Brentford. Nketiah shouldn't have played 100 minutes. Once again, individual defensive errors costing us. And I did put a clip up from me and James's podcast talking about the individual errors and why do they continuously happen. It is such a mystery why we cannot seem to just defend properly. Or it's not even defensive errors, it's individual mental lapses in key moments in the game, because I don't even think our defense was bad, like in terms of like they weren't getting cooked or anything like that. So it's wild. Jacob says Nketiah needs to go. Geeks of Uncle B says, I feel Toney would be exceptional for Arsenal. We need a clinical finisher. Aha says, was one of our worst performances under Arteta. Aman says, big up Jess. If you think yesterday's performance against Spurs was one of our worst performances under Mikel Arteta, I implore you to go back and watch some of our old games under Mikel Arteta in 2021. It's nowhere near it. Sohan says, I'm feeling so much better with the injury news now and the Toney news. I would imagine so, because the injuries for me are actually what stood out to me more than anything, because I can kind of move on from a draw against Tottenham pretty quickly because we have more games coming up. And that was a game that I kind of went into not feeling 100% confident we were getting the dub anyway. So the injuries are actually what scared me a little bit more, because I do want to get further in the Carabao Cup. I don't just want to throw it away. And also Bournemouth should be a 99.999 guarantee percent 3 points. And so we need a couple of players to come back in for that game. And then we need almost everybody back for the Man City game. So I'm kind of moving past the North London Derby, where I do still understand some people are heavily still like emotionally like unable to move on from it, which I understand. Lucas says Eddie is good enough for Europa League team. Not sure Brentford is a move for him. See, Walter says, I hate football for a week at least. Sohan says, if Toney has the Jesus chance, he scores. Also think if Martinelli was fit, he would have taken one of those chances, would go on to win the game. Nico says, let's be honest. Why would Brentford take Nketiah when they've got Wissa and Mbomo plus Nketiah is on 100,000 K per week. As bad as we think Nketiah is, he's nowhere near as bad as he seems for us. Like when we start talking about mid-table teams, I think sometimes when we speak about players that are not good enough for our team, we take that context into the context of Brentford. And I watched Wissa and Mbomo play the other day, and I thought they could actually use probably another attacker. They cannot just survive with Wissa and Mbomo and what's the guy that is always so annoying against us? Um, he used to play for Everton. You guys know who I'm talking about. You guys will tell me what his name is in the comments, but that's not enough. And for a mid-table team, Eddie would cook, like especially if they create a bunch of chances. Like as much as I don't think Eddie is good enough for us, I wouldn't go as far to say, oh, Brentford are too good for Eddie. Like, no, they're not. They're mid-table. Mope, exactly. Nketiah says, I think switching up to a double pivot like Brighton will provide us with much needed solidity at the back. I think that's a conversation definitely for when we start talking about Brentford and Bournemouth. But go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel before we actually get into like the jam of it all. Ivan Toney to Arsenal. So this has been a rumor that has been rumbling for a couple of weeks now. I had told you guys that there were the initial rumors coming out about Chelsea kind of getting the jump on us. In regards to Toney, they were starting to do some groundwork, but Fabrizio Romano reported, I think last week, that Arsenal and Chelsea had both looked at the conditions for the deal, meaning Arsenal are also quite interested in Ivan Toney. John Cross then reiterated that like Arsenal would have put in a bid for Ivan Toney had he not been suspended. So he is a player that Arsenal are heavily interested in and can get him probably on a cut price in January. Arsenal are stepping up their pursuit of Ivan Toney ahead of the January transfer window. Arteta wants to bring in a proven goal scorer to his squad, wants to add a physical presence to his attack, and Toney fits the bill, having scored 20 goals in the top flight last season. Nketiah could be included in any potential deal. And this is exactly what Arsenal should be doing. Remember, my concern about whether or not Arsenal would go for Ivan Toney was whether or not we'd have the intelligence to move, like be able to move Nketiah on in the same window, or if we would just be kind of like bold enough to bring him in and just say, you know what, Nketiah, we had to bring in somebody. And but the best case scenario would be to move Nketiah on. He would be perfect out of Brentford. We can get, we need to upgrade that position. And as much as I think that there's probably other strikers out there on the market that have a higher ceiling than Ivan Toney, I think at the bare minimum, he gives us that clinical finishing that we so desperately need this season. He can give us a good 3-4 seasons, maybe even 5, and then we can go back into the market again at a later date. I also think that there's the opportunity to have Jesus and Ivan Toney in the team. Because really, if we had played Jesus off of the wing yesterday and Ivan Toney was central, we wouldn't have had such a big problem with it, because Jesus was actually fine at left wing, but you wanted Jesus creating for Jesus, not Jesus creating for Nketiah, because Nketiah was like asleep yesterday. So I think that adds like a whole nother layer to your game where Jesus can actually play off of Ivan Toney. And I know as much as people are like, I don't want to play 4-4-2, but you don't have to play 4-4-2. Having two players that are like more of your strikers and another attacker that's more of your winger, that's something that we can do. We can do that with Martinelli as well. Like, it's just something that adds another layer. And Arsenal so desperately need a dead ball specialist and also somebody that can take penalties. Now, Saka is doing well with his penalties. Like, I do think that he's really worked on them, but I just feel more comfortable with my number 9 being the guy taking the penalties. And so this is something that is rumbling on. And it's something that I would be interested in seeing Arsenal do in January, because right now we're looking a little bereft in those attacking positions. We just need one more attacker, right? We need another body, and we need somebody that offers something a little bit different. And so if you remove Nketiah and then you have Saka, Martinelli, Jesus, and Ivan Toney and Trossard, and then you have Reece Nelson, that's a completely different conversation that we're having about Arsenal than we're having now. And it's not to be like mean or anything to Nketiah. I think at this point, the inclusion of Nketiah is more of an indictment on Mikel Arteta than Eddie, because Eddie's just, he's not his fault that he's playing. Like, he's doing as good as he can, and he's just the player that he is. I actually look at Arteta more sideways now about playing Eddie Nketiah than anything else, because it just is kind of like, at this point, like, can we do something else? Like, why do we have to play him? So I just want to show you guys like kind of like a comparison of the three of Ivan Toney, Gabriel Jesus, and Eddie Nketiah, and this is from last season. Ivan Toney played the most games. He actually played almost every single game for Brentford last season. Um, you know, his conversion rate is there. He actually took less shots and had less shots on target, just barely, from Gabriel Jesus. But, and obviously Gabriel Jesus's creative numbers are better than Ivan Toney's. But what kind of stands out to me is aerial duels contested and aerial duels success. I think that shows you that, like, he has that physical presence that we're probably missing up front. And we know that he can score goals. Like, it's really about the amount of goals that he can score and also offering physical presence. Like, we know that he can link play and stuff, and he can link play better than Nketiah. But, we have Jesus for that. We need somebody that's going to put the ball in the back of the net and just offer us a way out. We need somebody that when Rhea or Ramsdale are hitting it long, don't just allow the center backs to just like pull out a lawn chair and drink a beer and just have an easy day out. Like, they need to have a hard time. And if you have an Ivan Toney on your back, if you have Jesus on the wing, or you have Saka on the wing and Martinelli off the wing, or even maybe that's what you do to unlock Kai Havertz to run off of him, you're in a good situation there. So yeah, I'm excited about this because I feel like that would show me that Arsenal are not afraid to try to really push. But Ivan Toney is not a perfect signing. He's probably perfect in terms of stylistically and financially, but in terms of being the best striker that you can get for the future of your club, he's not that. So yeah, Yo-Yo says stinky hot take. Think Tony's potential signing will also affect Kai's place in the team. I would like to know more about what you're saying. Aha says Nketiah plus Odegaard had their worst games for Arsenal yesterday. I don't know how Arteta watched that and kept Nketiah on for 100 minutes. Should have been off at halftime. Ray's distribution was poor. All-time shit show. The only thing I would say about this is that, as bad as Odegaard was, and I'm biased towards Odegaard because he's one of my favorite players, but he's one of my favorite players because he's pretty much one of our highest and most consistent performers 95% of the time, along with Bukayo Saka. And so those two players for me, although people are desperate for me to always stick the boot into them whenever they have an off game, are going through normal like dips in form like other players. They just don't have any other players that tend to step up when they're not playing at their best. And so, I think Odegaard has bad games. He has a handful of bad games a season, and people are so desperate to go in on him and so desperate to go in on Saka. But it's hard for me to do so when they kind of carry the team for large parts of the season. And then when they have their dips of form, I don't necessarily see anybody else busting their ass to make sure that they take over the goals and assists and creation for those two players. So, and when they have 4 or 5 players on them consistently and they leave the whole other side open and the other side is missing sitters, I can't connect with it. He had a stinker. He wasn't good, but that's all I really need to say. I've seen some horrendous takes on Odegaard over the last 24 hours. And quite frankly, it's like embarrassing. This is somebody who's a Ballon d'Or nominee. Okay. Like, we're fucking lax. Okay. But Nketiah and Odegaard, they didn't have their best game. Fucking nobody did. Everybody was pretty terrible. But Nketiah playing 100 minutes was a little shocking yesterday. When Jesus came off, I did think that was the wrong call. But there's just a lot about yesterday that didn't go right. It's hard to pin it on like one thing or the other. So yeah. Nico says it's funny how Nketiah has a stinker but stays on for 100 minutes, but has no issues with hooking Trossard off at halftime against Fulham. Managers always have favorites, and we've seen it with Arsene. Every single manager has a couple of players that they have a blind spot for. You just have to hope that the blind spot is for a player of immense quality. And unfortunately, Eddie Nketiah has favor over other players in the team because of his professionalism and how hard he works in training, and not necessarily because he's a better player. It it is a little concerning, but at the same time, like, if we can move him on in January and bring in somebody like Ivan Toney, I think that would help. I just think he needs to be out of the situation. I don't know why he's so favored. Um, he's literally almost a starter. Like, he started almost every single game this season, even when Jesus has been like when Jesus even got 50 to 60% fit last season and Trossard was starting. Trossard was yanked out of the starting 11 very quickly, and Jesus was back in the team, not even fully fit. Jesus is fitter now than he was coming back from last season after being 4 months out, and Nketiah is still starting matches. Like, it's kind of wild to me, but every manager has a blind spot for a player. And unfortunately for Mikel Arteta, it's Eddie Nketiah. You what says, I hope we can give Nketiah to Brentford because Nketiah can get first team and Arteta can stop with his blind spot for him. Exactly. I think it's a win-win. It's what I would want. And as much as we don't rate Nketiah, or like some people don't rate Nketiah, I don't rate him as highly as some other people. I think he would be perfect at Brentford. I think that's his level. Geek says there's a disconnect between Eddie in training and Eddie in the game. I do not think he will come good. I think he's at his level. I think, if you put him in a team mid-table and he plays every single game and, he gets a couple of chances and he's asked to be a poacher, he'll be able to do it. But Arsenal's system is very heavily reliant on that fluidity up front. And if you're not going to have the fluidity up front and it's going to decrease the amount of chances that you create, the players that are up there need to make the most out of the chances that they get. And right now, we're creating less chances, and the players that we have up there are not clinical enough. So there's nothing wrong with changing the style and having a more stationary number 9, because Ivan Toney is not really going to be going out wide and playing like a winger sometimes and switching positions with Saka and Martinelli. So that is going to change the dynamic, and Arsenal are going to have to figure out a way to create chances without having that additional number 10 in the team like Jesus pretty much is. But if Ivan Toney gets the chance that Jesus has, maybe he puts it away. And that's the difference between walking away with 3 points against, the scum, or allowing them back into the game and dropping 2 points. Malia says there's better strikers out there. There are better strikers out there. Social Join says Nketiah is a project player. He is the project player. He's just the available guy, so he plays. That's it. Nashville says Osimhen would be a little more perfect than Toney. Of course, I mean, Ivan Toney, he's not young enough to be future-proofing your position, and he doesn't have the level of like pace and unpredictability and chaos factor that Osimhen does. Like, Osimhen is like a star. Like, he is somebody that changes the trajectory of your club, period. Like, whoever gets Osimhen is getting like a player that is probably going to be worth the 150 million that you pay. And so I do recognize that there's probably better options out there. But, in January, and depending on what Arsenal's budget is, Ivan Toney might just fit our budget and our needs a little bit better than Osimhen, and I still have a hard time seeing Arsenal spend 100 million plus on a player in consecutive windows, or summer windows. So, sometimes you don't get the best option, but that doesn't mean the option that you're getting doesn't really increase, the level of your team. Now, like, Ivan Toney is not going to take you up 5, 6, 7 notches, but he's definitely going to take you up 3 or 4. And I'll take that. I will take that. Aman says, Nketiah is one of the major reasons we don't create more chances and score more goals. It is no coincidence that our best performance came when Jesus was the 9. Mikey says, Odegaard has a bad game and the slander begins. Geek says previous stat was in the league overall 34 goals in 138 games. League 16 goals in 95 games, not good enough. And what I'll say about like yesterday in particular, like something that really stood out to me was that, I think it was it James Bench, he came out with the stat that like let's see. Let me just find it so I don't like butcher it. Why is it not? Arsenal made 12 ball recoveries in the final third yesterday, their best in a Premier League match during Arteta's full seasons in charge. And yet their press fell away dramatically after the bright start. Why was that? And what does that mean for big games ahead? And this aligns very closely with what I felt the first half was, which was we had them. We were picking the ball off of them constantly. They were consistently making mistakes, playing out from the back, and we just couldn't take advantage of it because we were not clinical enough. And so even though people were blaming Mikel Arteta for the entire match, because after that, the substitutions maybe weren't right, he kept Nketiah on too long. If the game is put away in that first 30 minutes, then it's over. And I think one of the things that Arsenal do not have a grip on is punishing teams in the way that they punish us. When we give them a half opportunity, it's in the back of our net. When we get a clear opportunity, we need 4 or 5 of them hoes to get 1 or 2 goals, And so I really think that getting a more clinical striker will help a lot of our issues that we saw yesterday. It won't solve everything, but because I think Declan Rice coming off meant the press was gone, period, point blank, so not having him also hurt us, and we'll talk about his injury as well. But yeah, you need to have somebody out there that is going to take advantage of those situations. Even if there's 1 or 2 chances, they got to put them away. So yeah. Jay says, yesterday's game, watching Eddie, I was furious. So frustrating watching a player not holding up his end of the plan and press. Time to move on and send him to Brentford and Toney deal. Geek says, we're just not clinical or ruthless. 2-0 up should have been pushed to 4-0. Time for the team to show its teeth. We don't have the players in the team. I think after, we've seen what certain people in the team are like, and then we've had another season with new players, but we kind of know after 38 games, I think you kind of know what you have. And not to mention the striker that we bought is known for not being clinical. So, and I love Gabriel Jesus, and I don't think we need to get rid of him or anything like that, but you need to have another striker in your team that has that in their locker. And so, we don't really have the players in the team right now that are ruthless enough. And I don't know if it's even just the players and their ability. I think it's our mentality. We just feel like it's okay and it'll work out and we'll eventually get the goal. And instead of really putting the game away, that's why PSV was such a relief, is because I felt like they finally got it. That you don't just get the 2 goals, you have to get 3 and 4 so that we can rotate and completely take the other team out of the equation. But in other games, especially in the Premier League at home, it's just we let the opposition hang around for a long time. We just think it's okay to give up silly goals. Our mentality is very, very, very suspect for a team that talks about winning things. So yeah, so it's crazy. Laundry Basket says, I thought we learned from Aubameyang to have one-dimensional players like Eddie. Milan says, Martin had kind of 2021 performance yesterday. He's just a human, but he's still my wonder guard. Yeah, he had a bad game yesterday, but I think that the conversation around him should end at had a bad game, move on from it. Malia says, just if Mikel doesn't win anything, should he be sacked? I feel like you have to really see how the season ended up. I think looking at Manchester City, I think it would be really difficult for anybody to say you have to beat this Manchester City team to a title. They are leagues ahead of everybody, and they probably will walk away with the Premier League or in the Champions League. So from my perspective, we need to be 1 or 2 points away from winning it's basically like what Klopp had to deal with. Klopp, world-class manager, showed that he had the chops to build a team with lesser resources that could keep up with a team that was in a different situation than him. He dealt with what he had, and he was able to keep a Liverpool team really, really close to a Manchester City team that was just a little better. And then the one time that Manchester City slipped up, they were there to take advantage. We didn't do that. And so, if you're 1 point, away from winning the title, I don't think you can sack a manager for that, especially when the team is Manchester City. And then it just depends on what we do in the cups. If, you win a cup, maybe you get, I don't know. You just have to see how the season pans out. What if we play Manchester City in the final? I would say I don't want to see us losing to teams in cups that are not better than us. That's what I'll say. If we were to get to the semifinals in the Champions League and we lost to Real Madrid, you have to see in context how things pan out. But as a general feeling, I think, in order for this season to seem like we're moving in the right direction, we have to be in the title race, and in the title race means not falling away and being 10 points away. We know what in the title race means. I don't have to really explain it. And a trophy would really alleviate a lot of pressure. It would really alleviate a lot of pressure. So yeah. Let's see. Sohan says Toney as the 9. I can see Jesus as the 8. Not gonna lie, or Trossard like in preseason. It would be nice if we tried something else at the left 8 position. I do think it's becoming a little bit of a focal point because we're just not getting enough out of that position. And it's no shade to Kai. Like, it's not his fault that the club brought him in on huge money to play a position that maybe he's not the right fit for. But we have to find a solution in our team at right now in order to get the most out of it. And right now, it doesn't feel like it's Kai Havertz. I think Vieira is somebody that still needs a little bit more time. He didn't have his best game, but like I tend to feel like, when everybody's kind of like at a low ebb, it's hard for like a player like Vieira to be the difference. But he's been pretty good. But the grown up in the room is Trossard. I think he played there for Belgium. He can do it. And I think he's the obvious choice to put there. I wouldn't move Jesus or Saka. I'm seeing people say, put Jesus and Saka in the 8. I wouldn't move them out of their forward positions. But Trossard, somebody who consistently comes up with goals and assists, is a grown up in the room, has been there and done it, has played in that position before, and would probably just offer a little bit more creativity in what we truly need in that position. Is he defensively sound or anything like that? No, but I don't think Kai Havertz is a fucking defensive dynamo, not enough so where Trossard can't be in that position, especially if you have Declan Rice in the team. So I would like to see it, at least because we need to figure out an internal situation for that position to try to get the most out of it. Because again, it's very easy to stop us at this stage because they basically just leave the entire left side open and put all their resources on our right, because they know if they shut down Odegaard and Saka, there's not really that much going on the other side, so yeah, it's just one of those. So Graham says the injuries already mounting up, a constant problem at the club. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the injuries. There's 170 of you guys in here. Let's like the video and subscribe to the channel for me. I really appreciate it. Injury news. I actually think there's good news on this front, which is kind of the most that I care. Like that, this is what I cared about coming out of the Spurs match. Like, I need to know that some of our players are coming back. And Arsenal believe Declan Rice's back injury is not long-term, with Mikel Arteta confident that the Gunners' record signing will be available against Manchester City. That's coming from Samuel McBell. Again, the guy that's pretty reliable when it comes to Arsenal news, except for when people don't like what he's saying. So we like what he's saying, so it's reliable. Wink, wink. Now, Nick Ames, who is also quite connected at Arsenal, has said that he could be available for Bournemouth. So, him, and then also a lot of the news came out at the same time. Sam Dean also said that Trossard could be available for Bournemouth. So we're getting some of our players together. So Trossard and Gabriel Martinelli are also expected to return from their hamstring injuries in time to face Manchester City, but it could end up being Bournemouth. It just depends on, I guess whether or not Arsenal want to risk them for that game or not. And then Thomas Partey is making good progress from his groin injury, and they hope that he's closing on a return sooner than expected. He was due to return after the October international break. So if you can get Thomas Partey in for the Manchester City game, along with Rice and Trossard and Nelly and I think that's it. That's a lot, but still, I think you're in a decent place there, to feel like, because the bench yesterday, people are like, I'm so scared about our depth. And I was like, but yeah, but really, you guys, like the depth was actually supposed to, like, if you have Trossard and Thomas Partey on your bench, you're feeling a lot more confident about things, you know? So I think having those players back is going to really help us. And it's a good thing that Declan Rice's injury is not considered serious. I think it was just precautionary. He felt something and he didn't want to exacerbate it. And I think it's the right thing for players to not exacerbate injuries, because if he felt something at halftime and didn't come off and then ended up with a Saliba type injury, people will be mad at him. And so even though we effed it up and we dropped up the 2 points, I just don't feel like it's worth risking a player so important to our team like Declan Rice. It did feel like Arteta was a little bit annoyed with him. Maybe he felt like he should have played through the pain, but I'm sorry. Like, these players, like, he is so expensive and he is so important. You know, he needs to be ready to play in some of these important matches. So I'm happy to hear that Declan Rice, it's not serious, it's not long term. Should be back by Manchester City, could potentially be Bournemouth. Trossard could be potentially at Bournemouth. Martinelli is going to be back by Manchester City, and so is Thomas Partey. So that is um, quite a bit of good injury news, even though, it did seem like things were getting a little scary at one point. Saka, there's no news on any sort of injury. He's probably fine. In terms of, what's going to happen against Brentford or in the cup, Arsenal are expected to rotate very heavily. So that basically, that what that means is don't expect to see any first teamers or anybody that's like super important to the team. They mention Tamiyasu, they mention Kivior, Emil Smith Rowe, Reece Nelson. These players are going to be expected to play. And also Cedric Suarez. So that's how deep we're going into the bench. And I guess you can make an argument like, why aren't Arsenal pulling in Ethan Nwaneri and, MLS and players like that, Walters, to play in these games instead of Cedric? As a general rule, I just think Arteta prefers his older players and more experienced players than relying on youth. That's just how he's been since he's been here. So, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. But Brentford is going to be a difficult game, because we're not going to have our best players, and Brentford away is not an easy ground to go to. I know that they're not in the best form, but that doesn't mean shit. If they play close to their starting 11 and we go out there with a heavily rotated side with guys that have never really played together, it is going to be a very difficult game. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that we get through to the next round. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that. But Bournemouth, Manchester City, and Chelsea are way more important than Brentford in the Carabao Cup. Way more important. We have to get the 3 points at Bournemouth. And it may seem like, well, Jessica, of course we are. We need to make sure that we have players fit for that game. I don't think you can go to Bournemouth with Jorginho as your lone six. And that's another thing, is somebody had said earlier that that, we need to try a double pivot. And somebody actually told me that before the Tottenham game. And I didn't actually think we needed a double pivot in the first half. But when Jorginho came on, we 100% needed to revert to a double pivot, because even if that meant putting one of our, defenders in midfield like Tommy or something, because it just baffles the mind why anybody would play Jorginho in a single pivot against a Premier League side, let alone a side that has Sarr and Basuma in it. So, I'm hoping that somebody will be available for Bournemouth, whether it's Partey or Rice, to play against Bournemouth, to make sure that we don't have to like change things up drastically or see Jorginho there, um, you know, with guys running beyond him. But for Brentford in the cup, I think you just have to go ahead and go with Jorginho and just see how things pan out. But I would like to see maybe a little bit of a change, just like maybe play a 10, maybe play a 4-2-3-1, and see how that goes. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Emil Smith Rowe in the 10. I wouldn't. Like, Jorginho plus somebody, I don't know who, but Jorginho plus somebody in a double pivot, and Emil Smith-Rowe in the 10. Play Reece Nelson, play Havertz, I don't know where, play Nketiah, play Vieira, play, all the guys that, are kind of lower down on the pecking order. But make sure that Jorginho is not on an island by himself, because it just doesn't make sense to do so. Gunniverse says, I would like Tommy to play CB against Brentford against Germany. He was looking good in a more natural position. And Tommy is a player that I want to see use more. We need to shut the back door. We're conceding too many goals. And I'm not necessarily sure it's just down to defensive solidity, but it would just be nice to see Tommy play a little bit. I think he's looked really good, and it's not that Zinchenko has been bad either. But also Ben White definitely needs a rest. So we'll see what happens with, the Brentford lineup. But, Tommy at center back is not something I'm I would be devastated by. Johnson says, maybe El Neni, maybe. Kivior has also played CDM before. Maybe you just drop him in there. Like, what you can't do is have Jorginho by himself on an island with Emil Smith-Rowe and Havertz, or Emil Smith-Rowe and Vieira. You might as well just knock yourself out of the competition, because you're not going to go anywhere. So yeah, it's just one of those. Crispy says things can get so sticky so quickly. Exactly. It goes so quickly. It could, and we get multiple injuries in the same position: Trossard and Martinelli, Thomas Partey and Rice. It's actually, we have really bad luck sometimes. So yeah. Let's see. Boy says, I doubt Arteta trusts his options enough to rotate Ben White. He has to. I mean, Ben White is an amazing player with a good fitness record, but he is on the cusp. You could look at him and say, you know what, this guy probably needs a little rest. And so, as much as I don't want to see Cedric, I just think, why risk it? Why risk it? Ben White is somebody that you absolutely have to have against Manchester City. Why risk it? Risk it for a biscuit. And this is really where Timber's injury becomes so devastating, because he was supposed to cover both of those positions, Saliba's position and Ben White's position. And it would just be so nice to have him right now, because he is quality. I actually think he would be a starter by now, by the way. But, it would just be so nice to have him in the team. Amon says Benny Blanco definitely needs a rest. Aha says White has played CDM, hasn't he? I just want him off and resting. I think that's more where I'm at with Ben. I would maybe try Kiwi there. But the thing about our players is that they're so inflexible. They're very inflexible in terms of like, whenever we try to change anything even slightly formation wise, it's just a train wreck. It just seems like we're very conditioned in a 4-3-3. And so whenever anybody suggests to change it even slightly, I get a little bit like I'm not sure that we're flexible enough where, we could pop a Kiwi or Ben White into midfield next to a Jorginho, and it wouldn't be a complete train wreck. So yeah, it's just one of those. I did see something. What was I saw a little thing here. Oh, Anton Dunn says, I don't want to see White against Doku. Sorry. What else? What other choice do you have? Whatever side, Doku can play on both sides. So whatever side, just going to go to whatever side. Like, so even if you are like, okay, I'm going to put Tomiyasu on, that side to shut him down, then just switch him over to Zinchenko's side. Like, Doku's going to play, and our defenders are just going to have to defend well as a group. Ben White is not the best 1v1 defender, but what choice do we have? I still rather have him than because Doku can just move to the right. I hope you guys know that. Nadish says Jorginho with someone like Kivior and Verding, like we did at the end of last season. And yes, Tommy at center back with a U21 right back, that wouldn't be that bad. I would prefer like a kid to come in, but it's going to be Cedric. Tawana says Cedric at right back cover. We have depth apparently. That's crazy. Kimsey says, Jess, where did you find this information? It's just on Twitter from Sammy McBell in terms of like all the injuries, injury updates. And then also Sam Dean and like everybody said the same things. So I promise I'm not making it up. If something goes wrong, it's because they made it up, not me. But yeah, that's where I got it from. Johnson says, if I'm Arteta, I'm going into the game. It's a game I'd go into with a Wenger approach, throw in MLS, Lino, Noweri, and give it a mix of the fringe players and starters in good fitness conditions. That, you know what the thing would be interesting is that, like, I think people would accept a team with more youngsters in it not going through than a team full of first teamers not. And Arteta should use that to his advantage. Because also, I do believe the Hale End boys, like we saw in preseason, in the short, like little blip that they had, were really giving it like 100%. And they're like, this is our chance, so we're going to give it. And I'm not saying you have to do all kids, but maybe just Walters and Noweri to start and see how it goes. Because at least you'll get that youthful energy. And I think some of our players don't necessarily perform the best in rotated squads in lesser competitions. So maybe that would work to his advantage. Maybe why we don't go far enough in the cups is because he doesn't use enough of our academy brilliance. So yeah. Social Join says, I'd be happy with Lino at left back. Off the Radar says, nowhere near City and Liverpool or closer to City. Gian Tesco says, Arteta deserves more criticism for the 65 million Havertz deal. Trust me, he's getting it. Like, I don't know. On my timeline, all I see is Havertz, Arteta out. Arteta needs to be sacked for this. Like, he's getting it, man. He's getting it. Like, it's not like Havertz is a constant conversation on the timeline, and Arteta is definitely intertwined in that conversation, at least on my timeline. Amon says ESR needs to take this opportunity. Otherwise, he will never see minutes considering Arteta don't trust him. Arteta also needs to put him in a position to thrive. Like, he can't just put Emile Smith-Rowe in this 8 position with Havertz on the other side and Jorginho. Then ESR is not going to have a good game. And I do think sometimes we expect players to perform well, even though there's no foundation for them to do so. And this is why I'm saying, because I want to see a good performance from Emile in particular, I want to see him in like the 10 in front of a double pivot so that he's not in a position that just doesn't suit him. I don't think he's an 8. I don't think he's somebody that can play in that position. I know it's kind of like double 10s, but I don't think that really suits him. So try to get him in a position like a number 10 and see how he does. Put him, put Reece Nelson on his left so that, they can kind of connect. I feel like there's some obvious things that we could do there to get the most out of Emile Smith-Rowe and Reece Nelson. Just play them in positions that really suit them down. But we're so inflexible. It is single pivot 6 with 2 number 8s or die. Like, there is no flexibility, like, whatsoever. So yeah. Ataboyega says the fact that Spurs are treating it like a draw and like a draw, like a win, says a lot about the difference between the Gunners and the Spurs. Martinelli, Trossard, Timber, Partey were not available. I would just say, like, in regards to that, like, I just think all in all, like, Spurs didn't even have to, they could have lost the game and the reaction would have been the same. I think the plot was already there no matter what. Spurs good, Arsenal bad, Arsenal in crisis, Spurs on top. So, they can celebrate it however they want to celebrate it. They said that, they look just as good, if not better than us in 6 days or 6 weeks or 6 games than a team that's been cooking for 3 or 4. They can think that. It's up to Arsenal to make it not true. And so I'm beyond the Spurs thing right now. Like, they can do whatever they want. They feel like it was a win. They feel like they're on top of the world, whatever. I'm more concerned about Arsenal Champions League, Premier League, making sure that we got our injuries back. Spurs were going to celebrate it even if they lost. Trust and believe. They were telling me beforehand is even if they lose, as long as they put in a good performance, it's like a win for them. That's what they were telling me before the game. Lucas says, just hope if we rest Saka, Jesus, White, we don't play them at all. Don't want them to come on at halftime when we are 1-0 down like last year against Oxford in Europa. That's the thing. We either go strong and win the game or we go weak and we just have to deal with what we do. Like, I think you just have to leave them off the pitch. Because also I do want some of a stronger team against Bournemouth. Maybe not our strongest team, but Arsenal, I don't think are at a stage right now where we could go into a Bournemouth game with like 5 or 6 starters out. I do think you need Saka, you need Jesus, you need pretty much like you could probably have 1 or 2 changes against Bournemouth away. And I know that sounds like we should be able to beat Bournemouth away with like a rotated squad. I don't think we're there right now. I don't think we're there right. So yeah. Let's see. Aman says, I even watched the game again and we were the better team for 35 minutes and we should have scored a lot more. Then we had that spell, and as soon as Rice went off, I knew it was wraps. Like, I know. I feel you. I get you. Eric Toss says, I want the pressure of a title challenge taken off Arsenal. Maybe they perform better with less pressure. That's the problem, though, is that Arsenal performing with less pressure means that we're not ready to do anything significant. I think Arsenal should embrace the pressure and feel like, and I think sometimes you don't embrace the pressure when you actually have like imposter syndrome. I think Arsenal have a little bit of that where they maybe watch Manchester City play or maybe like old Liverpool teams play or whatever and see that like or feel like they're not good enough. And so even though they're talking the talk, they're not really walking the walk. And anytime there's a little bit of pressure, they cave in. I think it's a huge problem that Arsenal don't seem to relish the pressure. They seem to run away from it. And it's something that's been a part of the club for a long time. Tawanda says, we're so reactionary as a fan. Chill. As for Spuds, they will always be disappointed after a few years. Gunnar says, Kivior has to play the Carabao Cup games. Hasn't kicked a ball. It's been a while. Does Arteta even trust him? Rustiness might get if we don't start him. The thing is that we always have like some players that just go cold and don't get any minutes whatsoever. And then we have to call on them like when we get a major injury, and then we expect them to be perfect. And when they make a mistake, we're like, oh my God, they're so shit. You need games to have any sort of sharpness, and I think Kivior is somebody that's being left on the shelf. And what that makes me feel like is we will have to use him in a time where we don't really want to, and it won't be fun. So he needs more game time. It's if you have Kivior next to everybody else and everybody else is a starter, he'll be fine, but I feel like that using your best 11 is going to start creeping back in, and some guys will go cold. That's what happens usually when we start to get more scared about how we're doing, start to clam up, starting 11 starts to get real stiff. We start playing people, even though that they're like super, super like unfit, they have injuries. That's usually what happens when we start getting worried. So we'll see how it goes. Nketiah says, Arteta has yes men around him. Was there anyone else in the club actually opposed to signing Havertz? That's a sackable offense, man. Well, I don't know. If it's a sackable offense to sign players that don't work out, then, or felt like bad signings from the beginning, then a lot of managers would be sacked. So I'm not sure if it's a sackable offense, but, the reporting around the Havertz thing was that there were people in the club that weren't 100% on board with the Havertz signing, but Arteta really convinced them that he was the guy that we needed to take us forward. So it is 100% on Mikel if it doesn't work out. So yeah. Let's see. Dua Lipa says, Dua Lipa Zaguner says, do a live with James AFTV. Maybe in the future. We did do something on Patreon. I know you guys are like, well, what are we want to see it for free. I hear you. Maybe in the future we'll get a live stream with James, but he is very busy. And so I appreciate the time that he gave me this morning. Boy says Arteta needs to learn how to rotate. Bottom line for me, either he has figured it out by now, or there are plenty of clubs he can go to and learn how to. So fair enough. But I just wanted to hop on kind of quickly and do the Toney stuff and give you guys the injury updates. And so just to remind you guys, for Brentford, watch along, live player ratings, that's all going to be available to you guys on this platform. And then I'm working on getting DJ Harry. If you guys have been on the channel for a while, you guys know who Harry is, and he's hilarious and he's amazing. And so he will be involved in some way in the Brentford content. So make sure you guys, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. And like I said, for Bournemouth, it's going to be Laura Kirk-Francis. She's also been on the channel before as well. She's going to be involved in the content for that. So yeah, and if you guys want to see the content with James B, the post-match podcast, and eventually the watch along that will happen either today or tomorrow. Not the watch along, the rewatch. That's on Patreon. Link is in description. But if you can't do it, no worries, because there'll be plenty of free content for you guys. So yeah, you guys, love y'all. Check out the clips if you guys, want to. I think I put up 2 clips already from the post-match podcast with James B. That's actually on the channel, so you guys can check those out. One about Kai Havertz and one about why we keep chucking in on our own net, and one about Nketiah is going to come out in a couple hours, so you guys can actually watch those. They're about 10 minutes long. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the content despite not loving the results so much. Hopefully we turn around results. It's so weird because we haven't lost a game, but I feel like we need to like turn around results or something. But I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys on the next one. Love y'all. Bye, guys.